Thank you so much for your patience. Okay, so we're going to get going with the mentor orientation session. So just a couple of introductions for the first part. My name is Anna. I'm one of the co-chairs of the REX committee as a part of our club, Undergraduate Research Opportunities. This is my co-chair, Amelia. So we're going to be running this orientation session for you today. And basically we're just going to start off with some introduction to the club and the program, get into some more specifics about what mentors do in the program, and then we'll have some workshops along the way to discuss potential issues that may arise or just situations that you may have to deal with at some point. So first of all, what is URO? Undergraduate Research Opportunities is the name of our club. We're an AMS constituted club, and we try to facilitate easier entry for undergraduates into the research world by providing both events and programs for them to sort of get acquainted with what kinds of research goes on campus, how they can get involved, and also through our program specifically for them to get some actual research experience going. So the REX program specifically, there we go, okay. Actually, first of all, so we run several programs, not just REX. REX is our main program that we cater both to mentors who are graduate and postdoc students and to mentees who are undergraduate students. But we also have the Canadian Journal of Undergraduate Research, which is basically, it's a journal that's Canada-wide, and we do get publications from all sorts of different fields, so it's a multidisciplinary journal as well, and it is peer-reviewed. So some of our REC students, if they do manage to do their projects, they can submit their projects to the to CJUR. We also hold office hours for students to give them advice, and then we have several events during the year run by our Student Engagement Committee. And the first of which is Life Sciences Research Night, or LSRN, which is basically a night for students from all walks of undergraduate life to come and find out what research in the life sciences is all about. And then we have our Research Involvement Fair, which is great for both PIs and for students, because PIs who want to hire students on as either volunteer or paid positions for research can say, I would like to hire this many students. We then offer the applications out to students. Students apply, we match them up for interviews, and students have the potential to be hired by the end of the night. And then we have a new program which we're calling the Amazing Research Race, which is effectively the Amazing Race but with research involved. So it's kind of meant to get some engagement going throughout the campus for various different types of research in different fields. Now the REX program specifically, it was established in 2013, so this is our 6th year running now, which is pretty cool. Effectively, the program works by matching up undergraduate mentees with graduate and postdoc mentors, and then you put together a project, which we're going to talk in more detail on in the coming slides. And then you can either, or the students either get to present their work at the end of the year at Merck, or they can even have the potential to publish it in CJUR. Now, basically, I'd like to give you guys a timeline. The timeline is going to be one of the more important aspects for mentors to consider going into the project, because one of the main roles of a mentor is to keep mentees on track. So it's really important that you have this in your mind as you're going forward. So first of all, in mid-October, you will be meeting with your mentees once we complete the matching process. And then in the coming weeks, you would get the opportunity to meet hopefully several times for the mentees to get some work going. And on November 9th, we have a deadline for submitting a research question. But in reality, what we're thinking of here is not necessarily a specific research question, but a research topic. So something that's relatively specific that you can focus a lit review on, but not necessarily your final research question on what you're going to be presenting at Merck. And then on November 23rd, we recommend that your literature review is mostly completed, or at the very least that students have compiled what they need for a literature review, which would then lead them to this more specific topic and go into what kinds of methods they're going to be using. We do recommend by December 22nd that you're getting going or somewhat finished on the methods section. But a lot of students do work over the course of winter break to get their projects done, so that is also totally fine. Generally with the REX project, the methods section and your projected results section are kind of like lumped together in terms of what you're thinking of, since there's no like doing of a project in between for the most part. In late January, there's an abstract submission for MERC. The MERC deadlines are not set by the REX committee, but rather by the MERC committee, which is a different organization. So we don't actually know the specific deadlines yet, but we will make sure to find out as soon as possible to let groups know so that you can more accurately have your timeline going. And then in mid-February, students who would like to present using posters get free poster printing if they submit by a certain MERC deadline, which will also be announced by the MERC committee at a later point. And then in mid-March is when MERC happens, usually somewhere in between like the 20th to the 24th, somewhere around there. So that's basically what I'd like you guys to keep in mind as we go through this presentation and also as you are doing your project with your mentees.
As we will be sending you guys this PowerPoint in case you're worried about it.
So, what's theoretical research anyway? Basically, the theoretical research project that we propose students do in REX is one that allows for a very limited budget to be able to produce some sort of research results. It's more so a proposal rather than a project that you've already done. And so there's a lot more of a focus on the introduction section, the methods as something that you're going to do, rather than a lot of focus on the results section, which is generally the most important part of a paper. And so you would probably have some sort of like projected results, what the students expect to find, but not necessarily what you actually did find, unless you actually the students actually get the opportunity to do their project. But we do encourage that students think about the discussion section, despite the fact that they don't get to do the results part. So the discussion section for these students would be more importantly to think about like the limitations of their methods, or in what ways their project differs from others that have been similar, versus how it's similar to ones that they have done, and in what ways their results would be important, especially for the real world applications of something that they're doing, since that's something that the MERC committee often looks for in adjudicating projects. As I've been talking about MERC a little bit, I'm going to show this picture of what the conference looks like. The conference takes place just down the hall in that like big open space there at the top of the stairs. And basically at this conference, it can be run in different ways in different years. Sometimes it takes place over the course of a few days, sometimes it takes place over the course of just one really long day. Students can either design a poster presentation or an oral presentation to present at MERC as the final general goal of the REX project. Now, the results section, I've talked about it a little bit, but I do want to go into a little bit more detail because you do have several options for what you can do with your students for the results section. The first of which is to consider results from projects that are similar to the one that the students are doing. It's quite possible that the students won't necessarily be building on something that's very new, but they may be doing like a replication or like an elongation of a study that's already been done, and therefore you can take the results from something similar and then like compare, if I were to use a slightly different method, then maybe I'd get a slightly more specific result. And then another one is to develop mock results. So just come up with not necessarily numbers from another paper, but just numbers that you could use, and then the students could get some experience with analyzing that data and coming up with graphs to put on their poster. Another way that it could be done is if the students are doing a project that's really similar to something that you might be doing in your lab or something that you have done previously, if mentors are comfortable with it and if it's applicable, you can loan your students your results, for lack of a better term, and then the students can analyze and present that. Or alternatively, if it is plausible and feasible, the students may actually get to do their project. This is probably a lot more possible in a project that's being done in more so like a humanities kind of research rather than in science research where generally your methods take a lot of money to do. And then in that case, you would report the results basically as you would for any other project. So, having been talking about all these things for a little while now, we're going to move on to our first workshop. And we're going to be discussing basically some thoughts about what makes a REX project different from your typical research project, not just in the context of the project itself, but also in the context of who is doing the project, like what makes a project done by undergraduate students at a pretty low level of research experience different from a project that's being done by somebody who's been doing research for several years. So if you guys could maybe group yourselves into smaller groups and then discuss this for a few minutes, then we'll come back together again and then we'll discuss some of our ideas as a group. So hopefully we've gotten some good discussions going. So let's just come back as a group now. We'll just take a couple of minutes to get some ideas going. So in what ways is a REX project different from your typical research project?
So the participants, the researchers, are going to be very different from what we usually get when we get more this senior year undergrad students. They will not know about lots of things like peer review. Like I've noticed such projects before, and they will need help to understand what the structure of the actual outcome, the report or paper is. They would not know how it's done. So small things that you would not expect them to not know, especially when you say that there's going to be wide range of people, wide regions, so if they come from different schools and different countries, they will have different difficulties with stuff that they're going to do, so it's something to consider.
Yes, definitely. There's always like every group is really its own kind of microcosm of like it's very specific how you're going to tailor your mentoring style, not just to each group but also to each student.
I think another difference is that it's sort of research proposal, but again it's not a research proposal because we'll be including discussion section, but without results. So that's how I see it different from the usual research project, which has 4 sections.
Yes.
From what I gather from your presentation just now, there's a possibility for us to generate our own data set for them to use. Is that correct?
Yeah,
So
exactly.
that's how we do this from our research.
Yes, yes. Nice. Well, you guys have clearly been an extremely productive group. Well done. Does anyone else have any comments? Because you definitely covered quite a lot. Okay, so in that case, thank you for your great comments. We've actually been writing these all down too, so you're going to get some of the responses from this later on. So let's move on now to the, you've already moved the slide, thank you. Okay, so basically we're going to start off with basically what a REX mentor is in broad terms, and then we're going to talk about it a little bit like at the slide after with some more like specific things that mentors should be doing throughout the project. So overall, we consider mentors to be resources, supporters, and coaches for their students. As a resource, this seems probably like the most obvious one. You're somebody who they can turn to with questions, somebody who can like guide them through the process, explain things that they wouldn't necessarily know that most researchers do know about, but because they're really just getting into that world. And then as a supporter, like I was saying before, it's really tailored to what each student needs. Some students are probably going to be more advanced than others, depending on like where they're from, what they know before, what year they're in. So it's really like supporting them through the process, and then as a coach, motivating them to keep going despite slumps or despite them considering like they don't even know what they want to do. It might seem like a lot of work. The mentor's role is to encourage students to keep at it and to get to the end goal of the project. More specifically, we have some pretty specific things that we'd like mentors to be aware of going into the project. First of all, the time commitment is about 4 to 6 hours a month, depending on how often you want to meet with your students for the most part. We do expect students to actually do the brunt work of the project. Mentors are more so there to help them, to maybe assign tasks to people if they feel like that's a good way to split it up, and also to serve as like a person with whom to discuss things in the project. We recommend setting up weekly or bi-weekly meeting times whenever it is that you can get together as a group, so that you can keep your students on track. That's one of the really main important things. And then when you are in those meetings, we encourage you to not use them for work, but rather for the discussion. We would expect students to come to these meetings already prepared, and if they're not coming prepared, then that needs to be addressed. The other thing is that you guys also mentioned the thing about peer review, lit review. The students may be coming to the project with some previous experience using search engines, but if they're in first year especially, probably not, being as search engines are often provided by the university. So they may need some help just saying like, this is probably the best resource to use. These are some good review papers to get you going from the get-go. These are authors who are like on this side of an argument versus on that side of an argument, that sort of thing, so that students know what they're getting into. And then when the students do actually do their tasks, they may, say, write up their introduction section, or they may write up their abstract. They would then hand that into you, you could say, and then you would just provide some sort of like just review of whatever writing it is that they do, maybe to help them sound more so like what research writing would look like in your field, or to say like maybe a generalized audience at Merck wouldn't be able to understand this, maybe you should define it, that sort of thing. And then, as I said, with the results, you may help them develop either theoretical results or analyze results that they collect, just to guide them through that sort of process of statistics if they do manage to get to that point. That would probably be pretty new. And then their poster and presentation help as well. The students have likely made posters before, but not research posters necessarily. So just tips and tricks, what programs to use, what to include versus not to include, how many, how much should there be in terms of like images versus words. There are going to be a lot of workshops that Merck provides on the posters and the presentations as well, but it's quite useful to get a more specific, less broad and more specific to your field kind of advice for the students. And then there is the potential to come to the project with some ideas that you may want them to work on. We do encourage students to think about what they may want to do ahead of time and to just come up with some research questions, even if they're very broad, that they may want to focus on. But there is the possibility that, say, everybody in your group, all 4 members come to you with like a different research question, and then you may need to like reconcile that into something that's more like brings it all together, or maybe nobody can agree on something and then they can agree on something that you suggested, something like that. So it's just something to like come to the table with, or if you already have something in mind that you're like, I would like my students to work on this, then that's also totally acceptable, and that's something that every mentor can decide for themselves. And then communication, that's something that we really want to talk about because it is absolutely vital in this program. For the group context of work, the group members need to communicate with one another. A lot of communication will be done through email, especially with the REX committee. We send out monthly newsletters to students, and we're also going to be sending out newsletters to mentors this year so that you can be appraised of what's going on. We do also have a website which is currently under development, so hopefully you'll also be able to get a lot of information through that. But for the most part, at first, you'll be starting off through email, and then if you would like to share phone numbers with your mentees, maybe to be able to contact them more easily, then that's also something that you can do. The most important 2 things are arrange meetings and arrange the time for them early, so that when everybody is getting busy later on, or when they have assigned tasks, they still know this is a weekly deadline, I need to have my tasks done by now, and if they don't come to the meeting, then you'll want to know why, and they'll know that they're supposed to be there, that sort of thing, just to like get a mindset of responsibility ingrained from the get-go. And at the end, your relationship with your mentees is probably going to be professional, but it's nice to be friendly too. If the students get to know each other and you better, then probably you're going to get better discussions going, and you're going to get more work done in a better way than you would if everybody's being sort of cold towards each other. Which brings us to our next workshop. The next workshop focuses on a lot of communication issues that may or may not come up for each specific group, but that we've encountered something similar in the past. I noticed that everybody split themselves up into roughly 3 groups. So each group can take one of these scenarios and discuss it amongst yourselves for a couple of minutes, and then at the end we'll come together and then we'll discuss some ideas from each one of these. Thanks for getting some discussion going. So we're just going to come back together now and we'll talk about each one of these in turn. So we'll start off with scenario 1. You or one of your mentees are out of town and won't be back for a while. How do you keep the project going? Group 1.
So I think we said that that's actually very similar to how real research works, that research teams are often in the same place, and so we would maybe tell them it's a good learning experience and then put in place some kind of communication structure to keep working well, whoever was listening.
Sounds good. Nice. Anyone else have anything to add? Okay, all good then. Scenario 2. You and your mentees all have really busy schedules and you can't find a single time every week that can work for a meeting. How do you stay in touch with one another?
We said that we did plan ahead and make a schedule and create a Google form, like share it with the group and so that they can complete the days that works for everyone. And if that doesn't work, then you can communicate via email or Skype or any other ways of communicating.
That's good. Anyone else have anything to add? Okay. Group 3. It's midterm season and your mentees are swamped. Sometimes they cancel your meetings last minute. How do you get your group out of this slump and back on track?
Okay. They basically said just maybe cancel in-person meetings through midterm season. That's obviously a priority, and then just keep in touch by email and things like that over Skype. And just maybe even making like a small checklist of things to kind of, okay, maybe don't be doing this, but just keep these in mind.
Nice. Okay. Good. So I'm glad that you guys are thinking about these ahead of time because they're definitely something that can come up over the course of the project. And I think one of the most important things is what you were saying about deciding ahead of time. Definitely decide most of these things ahead of time. As a part of our mentor manual, we included as an appendix a expectations sheet basically with some guiding questions and ideas that you can talk about at your first meeting to make sure that your mentees know ahead of time what the procedure is should anything like this happen. So that's something to look at before you get going with your project. So now we will move on to one of the new things that we're putting in. Yes.
Have you experienced the dropout people or students dropping out?
Yeah, we have had dropouts before. Usually this will happen sometime in late November to early December, just because sometimes students will get through midterms and then the finals just hit them really hard, especially as their first years and they've never really experienced a final season before. So we do get some students who join the program because they're curious about what it's like to do research and they can discover that it's not really for them. At that point, sometimes it's better to just sort of let them go and work with the group members who are actually more so engaged, because there will always be a range of the level of like engagement from each person. So yes, we have had dropouts. We try not to get mentees who are going to be engaged from the get-go, and usually it shows in their applications to you in September how much they're willing to put in, how much of an effort they're willing to put in, but it does happen. Any other questions before we keep going? Okay, in that case, we're going to talk about a new thing that we're putting in place, which is our feedback surveys. So basically what this is throughout the year, we're hoping to get feedback from both mentees and mentors about one another and about the program. So it's sort of like a peer review type, or like reviewing of your peers in a way. And the reason why we're doing this is because we want to improve the accountability of all of the participants in the program. We want to be able to address issues that may come up early so that we can provide additional support, and so that groups who may in January realize that like this is not working may realize that earlier on and then maybe change the procedure a little bit so that they can actually get things going and at the end actually present their project at MERC. Basically, we also want to keep an eye on what mentees may be in danger of dropping out as well. The feedback surveys will be mandatory for students and mentors to complete, and they'll be really short, like 5 minutes probably max, unless you want to write us a long, detailed written comment at the end. And so if mentees don't complete their surveys ahead of time, we can sort of identify that they might have issues later with meeting deadlines, and that's sort of something that we want to remedy ahead of time. And for mentors, it would also be useful to have, to keep track of basically your group's progress, because it will be happening at 3 time points that you get to evaluate your mentees. And then you may be able to see with like the scales over time, it may improve from your mentees not knowing how to do very much. And then at the end of the year, you say, oh, actually they managed to get this whole project put together and they learned a lot of stuff. So we're planning on taking in the advice and feedback that we get and providing that kind of support throughout the program. So how? We're going to be doing the 3 feedback surveys with pretty similar questions at 3 time points. The first of which will be in November, and this will be like a first impression survey. How is your group working so far? Have you met? Have you come up with a project question? We may combine this, depending on what time it is that groups manage to meet, with either like the research topic deadline submission or something like that. And in this, we'll be able to identify early on which mentees might not be responding very well, or if something else has like just come up, some students may want to drop out of the program. This is going to be a way for us to get that out of the way as soon as possible, so that then groups can proceed in the best and most they'll be able to use their time most efficiently from that point on, and to work with the students who really do want to be there. And then in January, we'll be going through current progress. Has your group gotten through the methods? Have you been working on an abstract? Are you planning on attending MERC? Things like that. So that'll be just seeing, has the group been going? And it'll be useful for us to see at what pace groups actually complete their projects as well, to see like at what point you are in January, so that we can maybe better structure our supports throughout the program to help with that. And then in March, we'll be doing a program recap, which is really similar to what we did last year with our program evaluation at the end. Basically, it'll be questions not just about your mentees, but also about the REX committee. Did we support you enough during the program? Was there something that we could have done better? Something like that, so that we can improve upon every year with these evaluations that we get in. And with the completion of these evaluation surveys, you receive certification at the end that you completed the REX program. You have your official mentorship experience, and for the mentees, they get their official research experience. So at the end, it's all going to be worth it at the end. We also, actually, just before we get to this part, actually, I wanted to ask whether anybody had any questions about feedback surveys or anything like that. Okay. In that case, we'll move on to the next part here. So, issues that may come up. Generally with mentees, it'll fall into one of 2 categories. My mentees are unresponsive, or my mentees are being uncooperative. In the workshop following this, we're just going to discuss several situations that may come up under these umbrella categories. But basically, the main thing to remember with both of these issues is to consider why it is that your mentee is responding or not responding in this way, and then to proceed kindly and respectfully. And if things aren't working, the REX committee is always here to mediate, so you can always email us with any of your concerns if you would like to. So with that, we'll move on to workshop 3, and workshop 3 involves 3 scenarios, all to do with potentially unresponsive or uncooperative mentees. Let's just bring it back now again, and we'll get a discussion between everybody again. And this time, we're going to go in the opposite order so that Rukwenda doesn't always have to talk first. So scenario 3. It is mid-November. You have a mentee who responded to your first email and then never showed up for a meeting again. You have tried to contact her twice in 2 weeks since then, and she has not responded. What can you do?
I think we pretty much just agreed on let you guys know that this person is not engaged and not interested and kind of move on with the rest of the group without them. You can't force somebody to be engaged in research. So.
Yeah, nice, perfect. And also, especially because it is mid-November, it would be an excellent time to put that in your evaluation of that mentee. If the mentee gets a consistent 1 out of 5 rating on everything, then we'll know that either that mentee isn't responding at all, or that mentee is just being problematic, and then we'll know to deal with that issue. Nice, okay.
I have a question for that. So
Yes.
let's say that first part happens, they never show up for a meeting. Is it soon, like I try to reach them, they never respond, they never show up. Is it the time for me to let you know that this person never showed up for a first meeting and I don't really know, because there is no grade by the end of it, yes?
Oh, yes,
So basically, I don't want to waste my time with this person who doesn't want to work.
Mhm.
Yes, sending emails and trying to.
Yes, yeah.
Should we just let you know that it happened?
Yeah.
As early?
Yes, as early as possible, definitely do let us know if you have any issues right from the get-go. It's possible, but just because we are the program, if we email them, they may think that it's a more more official, more professional sort of contact, and then they'd be maybe more inclined to just say, yeah, I actually didn't want to do it at all, or they just changed their mind, they got busy, something like that. Yeah, so as early as possible is definitely the motto for this entire presentation. So scenario 2, one of your mentees never shows up to meetings prepared, and the others have started complaining that he never does any work. How do you handle this issue?
Okay, so as I see it, a part of learning how to be a researcher or a scientist or any participant for any job type, whatever, you need to learn how to work in a group. And when someone in a group doesn't do the share, that doesn't mean that this person failed, it's group failed. And this is what I would like to explain to my students early on, that they need to find a way to involve all the parts of the group. Maybe it could be for different reasons. This person could be not participating by different reasons. Not because they're lazy, maybe they have some issues. So I would encourage the group first, before they come to me, they try to resolve this issue between them. So help this person maybe there could be some difficulties. Maybe switch the tasks. So I will start with dividing the tasks clearly between the group. So just help students to divide the tasks in accordance with what they like the most maybe. And then if this person doesn't do certain things, maybe they need to do something else. So this is something that group needs to work on. And I would see it as a kind of opportunity to develop these skills, the group work skills. And if it doesn't work, so I would say okay, this person maybe have difficulties and you need to do it yourself. Just do this job.
Excellent response. I like how you took a positive spin on it. It's a learning experience for the group in how to be better, work as a team better, do teamwork, that sort of thing. So definitely that is an excellent approach to it. It's really important to consider what the individual circumstances are in every case. And now, scenario 1. You have 4 mentees. 3 have agreed on a general topic, but the 4th is vehemently opposed to it. How do you resolve this?
So you try and talk to them, understand why they're opposed to it. If they're being reasonable, then you should be able to converge on a solution. If they're being irrational and stubborn, then we didn't see any other option than to vote them off the island, have them work on their own project.
Yeah, that's definitely an option. It sort of depends on how much work the mentor themselves is willing to take on, because definitely it's more work for both the mentor and the mentees if a person decides to split off and do their own project. But it is a way to make sure that peace is resolved and everybody is still doing something. And yes, it's really important to consider why it is that they're doing that. I just wanted to take this opportunity to point out that it's also up to you to decide how you want to split up projects within the group. It's possible that there may be several different ideas, and then you maybe vote on like doing 2 groups of 2, or you may want everybody to be working on something together, or you could even like split them up so that each person does something individually, but again, that won't work for everyone. It doesn't really take into account the teamwork thing. So yeah, just so that you know that it's like, it's up to you, and that's something that you want to consider as a group. Yeah. Any other questions or comments? Okay, great. So in that case, a quick timeline recap. We wanted to just go over this because this is going to have some more specific details about the matching process and both what the students are going to be doing and what the mentors are going to be doing in the next couple of months. So over the course of September, we recruit undergraduate students to be mentees. By early September, we're going to have all of the mentor biographies in, and then students are going to be able to read these over the course of the next few weeks and come up with hopefully very engaged and intelligent responses that they will then like send in as your applications to you. And you will be receiving these applications by early October. We're aiming to have them all to you by October 4th, and if not then, at the very least October 5th. So we will then get you to submit your preferences based on the applications of the students. The students' applications will consist of an answer to the question, what interests me about this mentor's research? And it may include them just explaining how it is that it connects to their major, or it may include them going off and saying like, I've done something really similar to this, I'm interested in this because of some like personal experience, I would like to do a project like this. So definitely the responses will be very varied. And over the course of about a week, we'll give you till roughly October 12th to submit your preferences through a form that we will send along with the students' responses to you. And then by then submitting this form to us, within the next week or 2, we should have the matching results out. And basically what this is probably going to look like is we're going to have either, we're probably going to have a spreadsheet that has all of the groups sorted according to mentor's name, and then you'll see the list of your students underneath that. And then within the next couple of weeks, you'll be able to see the students as well as their contact information, so you can send out like a group email to all of your mentees, find a meeting time, just get in contact and get something going. And within the next couple of months, you have the time to develop a question, come up with methods, etc., make a poster. The abstract submission, as I said earlier, is in late January, and then MERC is in March. And then at the end of that, we're going to be having our final evaluations, and along with the mentees' final evaluations of mentors, we include a Mentor of the Year survey, in which the students can potentially nominate their mentor for being one of the best mentors of the year if they really feel that you did an amazing job. And I didn't include this on this list, but we do actually have some events during the year, the most important of which is going to be our mentor-mentee mingle, which will be in late November. So this should be after groups have met each other, but the event is basically meant to be a time when groups can meet each other, so you can find out what other mentors are in the program. The students can find out if their friends turn out to be in the program and they had no idea. It's a social event so that you can get to know each other a little bit better. And we provide food, we provide some activities to get some discussions going. So that's going to be an interesting one. And then we also had this discussion at the orientation session from last night, but we would like to have an event for mentors especially, because we think that it's a great professional development and networking opportunity for the mentors as well, so that you can find out what strategies are other mentors using, what's working, what isn't working, maybe just to find out a little bit more about the other people who are in the program. And we'd like to decide on a rough timeline of when an event like this might be useful. So it would be great if you guys could give some feedback now, if you have any suggestions for what time that might be useful, just like a general what month or something like that.
It's like November maybe?
Like a late November?
Before everyone leaves for Christmas
Mhm.
exams, but before the January submission.
Yes. Okay. Yeah, that's kind of like the timeline that we were also getting. So would either a late November, sometime after the mingling event, or would early December still be an okay time? Okay, great. So we'll definitely take that into account. And then basically, at this point, we would open the floor up in case anybody else has some questions for us, in case you want something more specific answered. You can either ask us now, or you can come up to us and ask us directly afterwards. And just so that you all know, we have recorded this, and we'll be sending a link for the presentation to you so that you can watch it again if you'd like. And we will also be giving you the slides and some of the discussion topics that we've been talking about during the presentation so that you can read over all these resources again in case you want to. So with that, I'll open up the floor for questions, and thank you very much for coming. Yes.
Do you ensnare the undergrads in Imagine Day? On Imagine Day?
We do try to ensnare them, yes.
But is
Yes.
that when most of them sign up?
We get, so basically the way that the mentee sign up is going to work is we're doing sort of a two-step process. One in which they initially sign up and indicate their interest in the program. This will be during Imagine Day and during our, like when we're announcing in classrooms and have our mentee events during the course of September. But the official registration is going to open on September 7th for the mentees, and then they'll have until the end of the month to fill that in. So it's sort of like a two-step thing. But we try to catch their interest in Imagine Day, and then we give them the opportunity to apply during the course of the month.
I have a question. So we're gonna have, we're gonna receive duplicates of whatever our mentees are gonna get on the information, yes? So this is my issue. Like, I would like to know what guidelines they have already and what they need to prepare maybe to help out them, like, from my perspective. Like.
Okay, so if you'd like to know specifically what it is that, like, both what we tell them and what we tell you, there is both a mentor and a mentee manual. I mean, a lot of the information in them is pretty similar, but the mentee manual will specify the roles of the mentee in a little bit more detail. So you can just give that a quick read through and find the sections that are of interest. The mentor manual also involves some talking about what it is that mentees are expected to and what mentors are and aren't expected to have to do. So those are resources that you can definitely look at. We send out the mentor manual with our emails to you guys, and the mentee manual should be available as well online once we get our website technical issues worked out. So we'll definitely let you know when that's available, and we can even, like, if you'd like a copy, you can send us an email, we can send you the mentee manual directly.
And there's also like additional resources that UBC have, like, for example, writing classes or whatever. So
Yeah.
I know about some of them, but I'm pretty sure that I'm missing something.
Yeah.
So, do you have anything like that that could be available? Like maybe
So-
list of something, workshops that gonna happen?
Yes, we do actually, both Merck and Rex do workshops for the students. So the workshops that Merck does are primarily regarding the abstract submission, the poster and oral presentations, whereas Rex does workshops in October, November for mentees related to a general how to do lit review. And then also how to read a research paper is going to be one of them. So it's sort of like those research basics kind of workshops is what we do. The resources that UBC has for undergraduate students are really broad. I think a lot of them can be found on either the library website or something like that, but we can try to pull together a list. I mean, it would be useful for mentees to have a list as well.
It would be useful for me too, because I don't wanna like run out. I know that some of the students are efficient and don't read like email that are like must send.
Yes.
So they don't just look at it, oh, well, it's something not relevant. So I would love to have the copy of like, oh, there's a workshop that would be useful for you because you're missing this and that, you don't have this information, and I would recommend you to go there.
Yeah.
So I don't need to dig through all of the things that are there
Yeah.
to recommend it to my students.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
this
that's something that Rex can definitely look into. That would be useful. Thank you for the suggestion. Does anybody else have any? Yes?
If students can't find a mentor that's doing research related to their discipline, do they usually leave a program or just pick an entirely different field of research?
So usually they would try to find somebody who's at least somewhat related. That's why we try to get mentors from as diverse a field as possible, but some mentees, unfortunately, there is maybe like only one mentor in their field, and then that one mentor gets like 40 responses, but you can only pick 4 at the end. So for those students, if they don't manage to get matched, unfortunately, then we try to find other options for them. We do have other programs that URO provides, so we try to do what we can for them, but overall, if like, it's kind of limited by what mentor pool it is that we have, but we try to offer other resources for them. Yeah. Usually you won't get somebody who's like in, I don't know, biology applying for somebody who's in mechanical engineering or something like that. It usually doesn't happen, but somebody in biology could apply for somebody who's in biomedical engineering, something like that. So it just depends on what their specific interests are. Any other questions? Awesome. Well, in that case, thank you all for coming. I hope that this was useful. If you have any other questions, please feel free to send us an email or talk to us here afterwards. Thank you so much.
It's